All right, we're ready to start Basics of Biblical Hebrew, chapter 21, which will be infinitive absolute, infinitive absolute. So we'll start off with Hebrew Insights. Then we'll go over the workbook, see if there's any questions. We'll go over the translations in it. Then we'll we'll get into the Qal Infinitive construct. That is incorrect. Should be infinitive absolute. Okay, well, I found an error. I need to change that. Absolute. And then we'll go over the vocabulary. So for the insight, I want to start off with some play on words. Sometimes when we read our English translations, there's statements that don't seem to follow. They don't seem to be related. In English, we call this, well, it's probably actually Latin, but non sequitur, and it does not follow logically what preceded it. And this is sometimes due to a play on words in the Hebrew, but it's completely lost in English. So here's an example from Amos 8:2, where the statements seem to be totally unrelated, and it's because we don't see or hear a play on words between summer produce and end. So the quote from Amos 8:2 is, "And he said, 'What do you see, Amos?' And I said, 'A basket of summer fruit.' Then Yahweh said to me, 'The end has come for my people Israel. I will pass over them no longer.'" Wow. So summer fruit and the end, we just don't see a tie in English. What does summer fruit have to do with God's coming judgment? I'm glad you asked. If we take a closer look at Amos 8:2, we see, "And he said, 'What you seeing, Amos?' And I said, 'Basket of summer fruit,' or summer produce, same thing. And he said, Yahweh said to me, 'He comes, the end, to my people Israel. Not I will add to Passover again, Passover to him.'" So we see this kates for the end. We see kates for summer produce. And so it's obvious to us, or especially when you say it, kates and kates, they sound alike. And so this is actually a play on words, and that's why it makes sense in Hebrew. But in English, it makes absolutely no sense. You go, well, I don't know why. Another one, it's in the New Testament, and the angel said, "You will call his name Jesus because he will save his people from his sins." Why does that follow? That makes no sense. But when you go back to his name in Hebrew or Aramaic, Yeshua, you will call his name Yeshua because Yeshua is people from their sins, because salvation, he will save. That's what Yeshua means. He saves, Yahweh saves. So anyway, it makes more sense when you see it in the original language. So that's one. Another example is Jeremiah 1:11 and 12, which says, "Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, 'Jeremiah, what do you see?' And I said, 'I see a branch of an almond tree.' Then the Lord said to me, 'You have seen well, for I am ready to perform my word.'" What? Huh? An almond tree branch and coming judgment? Again, it doesn't seem to make any sense to us in English. And again, it's because it's a play on words. So we take a closer look at Jeremiah 1:11 and 12. And we have, "What you seeing, Yirmiyahu," Jeremiah. "And I said, a branch of an almond tree I am seeing." A branch of an almond tree I am seeing. Notice the O vowel here. That's a participle. It was the same way on the previous verse too. I didn't point it out. We'll be looking at participles next week. So that's just a teaser or something for next week. So anyway, I'm seeing the branch of an almond. So we have shakade here. And then so God speaks to him, and we'll just cut to the chase here and say, "Because shokade, watching I over the words to do it, do him, the words of me to do it." So we have the shakade, the almond tree, and shokade, watching. And so again, it's a sound alike or sound similar, not just alike, but it's a play on words, and that's why it makes sense in Hebrew. You go, oh, that's clever, but when you're reading in English, you go, huh? I don't see the connection. So um, that's just a couple. There's a lot more than this. That's just a couple examples. And then lastly, I just want to take a preview of what we're going to be talking about tonight because the infinitive absolute it is kind of an insight. We do get some understanding by recognizing the infinitive absolute. We don't have an infinitive absolute in English. We don't have anything like it in English. Something we do not have in English. While it has a few different uses, the most common form is emphasis. Emphasis. So this, we're not looking at the Hebrew now, but this is just to give you an example of what some of the how the infinitive absolute is used for emphasis. In Genesis 50:24, to visit, he will visit. That's a wooden translation of the Hebrew. And translations are mostly, English translations are mostly going to say, he will surely visit. To visit, he will visit. This would be Joseph talking to his family that God's going to lead him out of Egypt someday before Joseph dies. To visit, he will visit. So it's emphasizing he will surely visit. And another thing to notice here is you have the infinitive to, but you have a verb that looks exactly like it. You might want to take note of that. We're going to be looking at that more later. Exodus 3:7, to see, I have seen, or in English translation, you say, I have surely seen. But you can see how there's emphasis to using this infinitive absolute. 2 Kings 1:16, to die, you will die. You will surely die. You will certainly die, is the way it's usually translated. So it's emphasizing. And so it's been said that the Hebrews used repetition to emphasize things, and that carries on into modern day preachings, and that's why sermons don't get done quite as early, is because we repeat things. And I'm guilty as charged as well. So anyway, that's what we'll be looking at is infinitive absolute. It is an insight, uh, but I didn't want to leave this as an insight all alone. That's why I included the play on words. But that's what we'll study. But before that, and that's why we read Hebrew. Then we can recognize word plays and we can see emphasis in the infinitive absolute. So, were there any questions in the workbook for chapter 20? You may have noticed, like on page 82, that not all of the conjugations were infinitive constructs. That's what we studied last week, infinitive construct. And some of them were kind of dual. For instance, number 6 could be an imperative or an infinitive construct, and we don't have any context. We just have a word. There's no context to tell us which one it is. But others, like number 9 or 13, there's some that were not. So those were kind of thrown in to maybe stump you or make you think a little bit. Okay, if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and go to the Bible translations. Since that's not an answer key, that starts on page 84. And the first one is from Genesis 41:57. And all the earth they came Egyptward to buy grain to Joseph, because he was strong, the famine in all the earth. Okay, that was pretty wooden. We'd smooth it out in a real translation. The word we want to focus on, though, is lishbor, right before it says in parentheses to buy grain, third word from the end of the first line, lishbor. We see that O vowel in there, and yes, that is an infinitive. And it also has a lamed preposition prefix. That's most of the time, 85% of the time, it will have a prepositional prefix. It might be a lamed. Most of the time it's lamed. Sometimes it'll be a cough or a bait. But that's our infinitive construct there. I said Egypt word. No, notice how the word Egypt meets rhyme is in kind of a gray text there to tell you that's a name, but the hey is not. That's one of the directional hays. You got the comet's hay ending. Uh, it's not accented, and so that's a directional hay. So that's why I said Egypt word. In good English, you'd say to Egypt. They came to Egypt to buy grain. Also, last week, I think I mentioned about shavar. Shavar means to break, but um, shabor here, the infinitive form, that it means to buy grain. And I think I mentioned that last week that you'll see that. This is not unusual. We do this in English, many words, wind. Is it wind or wind? Um, and there's just a lot of those. Or pitch. Pitch is one of my favorites. Are you talking about tar? Are you talking about throwing a baseball to the batter? Are you talking about the slant on a roof? Are you talking about a musical note? And so forth. There's actually a couple more besides that. The point is that we have words that look exactly alike, but they are different in meaning. And that's what this is in Hebrew. Number 2, coming from Exodus 31:16. And they will keep, the sons of Israel, so the sons of Israel will keep the Sabbath, to do the Sabbath, to the generations of them, a covenant forever. Okay, and the word we want to focus on is right, well, it's the third one from the end again, la'asot, to do. It's the infinitive construct, and again, it's got the lamed preposition prefix on it, to do. And maybe I should say, like on the first one on the last line, for the generations of them might be better than to the generations of them. But just a wooden rendering. Number 3 from Deuteronomy 29:3, which is actually 29:4 in English. It's and not he gave Yahweh. So Yahweh is a subject. So Yahweh did not give to you all a heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to hear, until or as far as the day of this one. So this day. And so we have 3 infinitive constructs. We have lada'at, which is right above the D of Deuteronomy there in the so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 word in. So to know, a heart to know, eyes to see. Again, both of these, all 3 of these actually have lamed prepositions prefixed to them. To see, lirot, and then to hear, ears to hear, lishmoa. So we had 3 infinitives in that one. Number 4 from Nehemiah 1:4. And he was, as to hear me, the words, these, so these words, I sat and I wept. The second word in is our preposition. It's a infinitive construct with a preposition. This time it's the kaf instead of the lamed. And so that's why I said as to hear me, because it also has a pronominal suffix on the back end of it. So, and it was, and he was, or and it was, as to hear me, the words of these, I sat and I wept. Number 5 from Joshua 1:7, only be strong and be courageous, very. So be very courageous. To keep, or you say to guard, or to protect, and to do according to all the laws. And so the third and fourth words from the end, lishmor and la'asot, those are our infinitive constructs, to keep and to do. And actually in Deuteronomy, you see that combination a little bit more regularly. Number 6 from Deuteronomy 8:6. And you will keep the commandments of Yahweh, the God of you, to walk in the ways of him and to fear him. And so we have laleket, to walk in the ways of him. So that's our infinitive construct. And then, and to fear. And And we have the lamed preposition on both of those. Those are our two infinitives. And he's got a footnote down below regarding this fearing. Number 7 from Genesis 39:10. And it was as to speak her to Joseph day, day. So it's probably day by day or day after day. We have to add something in there in English to make that make sense. Day, day. That is not unusual in Hebrew. You do see that type of thing done, and we have to fix it for English. And not he listened to her to lie beside her to be with her. Okay, so the first one is the last word. No, the first one is actually the second word. And we have the cough preposition on the front. And then we have that hey, it looks like it's got a dogesh. It's not a dogesh. It's called a mapeak because you can't have a dogesh and a guttural. But they look similar, but that is a part of the third feminine singular. So that's as to speak her. And it was as to speak her. So that's her infinitive construct. Then the last word on the first line, to lie, the shakav, or lishkav, I'm sorry, lishkav, to lie. And again, it's got the lamed preposition prefix. And then the next to the last word, we have another infinitive construct, and it also has a lamed preposition attached to the front of it, to be. That comes from haya, he was. This is a infinitive, to be. Okay, next page, number 8. Yahweh, he will keep to go out you and to go in you from now and as far as forever, or until forever. Last Psalm 121:8. And so we have two infinitives. We have Seitcha, to go out you. The you is the cha is the pronominal suffix, and while the second one also has a pronominal suffix, and to go in you. So to go out you and to go in you. He will keep you as you go out. He'll keep you and you're going out and you're coming in. That would be using a gerund, like we talked about last week. You use a gerund with an ing. He will keep your going out and you're coming in, but it's still a verbal noun. A gerund is still a verbal noun. Hebrew doesn't have verbal nouns. Neither does Greek. They just use infinitives. Those are the two in that verse. Number 9 from Exodus 33:8. We have the same kind of thing. The second word, as to go out. So let's start at the beginning here. And he was, as to go out, Moses, to the tent. They arose, all the people. So we have as to go out. And I say as because it's the kaf preposition this time instead of the lamed. And then number 10 from 2 Samuel 7:5, we have go, and you will speak, or you will say, to the servant of me, or my servant, specifically to David. Thus he said, Yahweh, you will build for me a house to dwell me. Okay, so the last word we see lashiv t. We see the pronominal suffix at the back. So me, it's a first person singular. So to dwell me, a house to dwell me. Any questions on those translations? All right. Just a quick review. I've said this already. We'll say it again just to keep this straight as far as when I am woodenly doing translations, like next week when we go through the workbook, I'm still going to say to for the infinitives. It's entirely appropriate to use gerunds sometimes when translating in English. But for the wooden translation to indicate, because if you use an ing word, it sounds like you might be thinking it's a participle or something. But if you say to, then if you're reading it to me, that I know that you know it's an infinitive. And whenever you hear me read it, and use the word to, you can tell that this is indeed an infinitive. So I'm going to be pretty persistent in that. And yeah, we talked about last week. This is all from last week. Seeing is believing. That's what we say in English. These aren't participles. Participles are verbal adjectives. Infinitives are verbal nouns. And so in Hebrew or Greek, you would say to see is to believe. The most common infinitive construct in Hebrew is lemor. You see this so much, to say. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses to say, well, that's the way I'll do it woodenly in wooden translations in class. But if you're just translating it for somebody else to listen to, somebody who's not a Hebrew student, or if you were actually working on a translation committee, I'm sure you'd say Yahweh spoke to Moses saying. But in this class, we're going to make sure we know it's an infinitive by saying to say, infinitive construct. All right, now we've kind of done a review on infinitive construct. We need to take a look at infinitive absolutes, chapter 21. So infinitive absolute is another conjugation. We've looked at the perfect conjugation, the perfect being completed action. We've looked at the imperfect, incomplete action. Perfect, we usually use a past tense. Imperfect, we usually use a future tense, sometimes even a present tense. Now that changes when we have evolved consecutive, as you remember. Then we looked at the imperative. And then last time we looked at the infinitive construct. And today we're looking at the infinitive absolute, and the only one left is the participle. So we'll study the participle next lesson, and then we'll look at sentence syntax, and then we'll start getting into the other stems that are derived from this Qal stem. So for today, we want to understand what an infinitive absolute is. We've already talked about it a little bit. We want to learn the form of the infinitive, Qal infinitive absolute. And we want to understand the meaning of infinitive absolute. And then we're going to take a look at yesh and ain at the end of the lesson. So we talked about this last week too. Infinitive is a verbal noun. And we also looked at the fact that there's two kinds of infinitives. There's the infinitive construct. That was last week's lesson. And then today we're looking at infinitive absolute. Now, the infinitive means it's a verbal noun, and construct means you can add to it. And for infinitive constructs, we saw that you can have prepositions added to the front. Today, we're looking at infinitive. It's still a verbal noun. That part doesn't change, but now we're looking at absolute. Absolute means it stands alone, and that means it does not take prefixes or suffixes. Now, it can, well, okay, so katol, there's our, the form we need to remember. We have the ka. That's a comma, it's not an O. That's not a comma satuf. It's an A vowel. And then we have the holem vav there, katol. That's the form we're using. That's what we're going to be looking at. And the reason why we had the little star here on prefixes, suffixes, is because you can have an interrogative particle asking the question, or you can have a conjunction vav on the front of it, but you will not have prepositions put on the front of it, nor will you have pronominal suffixes added to the end of it. So the options are katol, we can have vekatol, or we can have hakatol. So the vav for the conjunction or the interrogative particle. So that's what it looks like, what an infinitive absolute looks like, what it is. Now we want to be able to learn the form, and it really is pretty simple. So identifying the infinitive absolutes are the least frequent. You're going to find infinitive constructs way more often. There's about 817 times. You'll find it in all the Hebrew scriptures. Infinitive absolutes are usually very easy to identify. That's what we'll be covering here. So katol, that's the form that we'll be looking at. You want to look for the A vowel and the O vowel here. So we have the comets, A vowel, and we have the holem vav, O vowel. Or you could spell it defectively with a holum instead of a holum vav. That's still the A vowel and O vowel, either way. And most of the weak verbs have the same diagnostics. This is, like I say, this is actually pretty easy. Once you have learned this form, katol, if we look on page 230 at 21.4, top of the page, we see on the left-hand side, we have one guttural, another one guttural, different guttural. The one aleph, the two guttural, a couple of different kinds of gutturals. We have the three chet, the three ayin, the three aleph, the one noon, the one yod, and just so the lexical form is in the next column. We want to look at the middle column. And if you just scan all the way down through there, you see the comets and the holum vav. You see the a-o, all the way down through here. Now, there are a couple of things you might want to take note, like in the three chet, we see the patak that actually should be moved over. And I've noticed that in this book, they have trouble printing the furtive patak. It should be under the right leg of the chet there. And then the same way with the furtive patak under the ayin, right below that, it should be moved over to the right a little bit. This is just a printing thing in the book. In every Hebrew Bible I've got, it's in fact in most of the apps they get it moved over correctly. In fact, my keyboard, my Hebrew keyboard on my computer does that real well too. Now you can have defective spelling, but if you just look down through there, you still see the A vowel all the way down through the whole list, and you still see a holum, the O vowel, all the way down through the list. So there's not a whole lot of stuff you have to memorize. It's pretty easy to see the form here. The main exceptions are the three hay verbs. So we have asa, which is three hay, and we get aso. We still have that A vowel and O vowel. It can also, that's defect. The first one is defective. Top one's defective spelling, but then we have the full spelling. It's still aso, still pronounced the same way. And you can see more of those on the bottom of 230 under 21.4, but they're exactly the same. And it has both. It's got the defective and the full spelling there. But you still have that A comets vowel, and you still have the O holum vowel or a holum vowel. Not too hard. Now on the next page, 231, looking at biconsonantals, we don't have the A vowel, so these are a little different, but we do have the O vowel. So moot means he died, and mot, to die. So those are top of 231. The easiest way to identify most infinitive absolutes, you have this form, katol, but they usually occur with another form of the same verb, just like we looked at earlier. To visit, he will visit. Trying to think about some of the others where I had in at the very beginning there. To visit, he will visit.
See, die.
Oh yeah, to die, you will die. So yes, you normally are going to see the same root. Of course, you have the holum vav in there, but you still have katol over here, katol. And so this would be your infinitive absolute, katol, and then we have tiktol. This would be the second masculine singular. So to kill, you will kill. You will surely kill. It's emphasizing you shall surely kill. But that's one of the easiest ways to identify most infinitive absolutes. Most of the time, you're going to have the same verb or the same root. There's kaf, tet, lamed, kaf, tet, lamed. You have the same root right next to each other. Oh, by the way, go back to that. There are some times where you actually will get the verb first. and then the infinitive. They don't have to be infinitive first. So that's just a heads up on that. Okay, next, understand the meaning of the infinitive absolute. There are several ways in which it's used. By and large, it's going to be this emphatic thing. So going back to the same example we had there, to kill, you will kill, or you will surely kill. That's one of the ways it's used. So that's emphatic. It's being emphatic. These are on page 231, 232. Okay. There are really so many. I mean, I can give you some other examples, but there are examples at the bottom of page 231 of this emphatic use. I don't know that I need to belabor that. So example is Genesis 2:17. When we find mot tamut, to die, you will die. This is being the imperfect, second masculine singular, preformative, in the day, to eat from him, to die, you will die. On the day of to eat you from him, to die, you will die. So we see the same verbal form used here. The red one here is the infinitive absolute. We do have another one here, the Qal ka. That's to eat, in the day to eat. So we could change that to a gerund and say, on the day of your eating. Let me go back. And so here, have it woodenly, on the day of to eat you from him, to die, you will die. That's the wooden, rough, word for word rendering. But we could say, change that one to a gerund and say, on the day of your eating of it, you will surely die. But the surely die is saying, to die, you will die. Emphasis. And then we have shove, ashuv. Shove, ashuv. I will surely return. To return. Here's your imperfect preformative. It's a one common singular. To return, I will return about the time of life. Then we have, notice this is the question mark, the interrogative particle. So it's asking a question. To reign, you will reign over us. So we see the melech there, the verb to reign. Again, we have the preformative, second masculine singular. To reign, you will reign over us. It's asking a question. Will you really, will you surely, will you truly reign over us? And then we have yatso, yatsa, yatso, yatsa. To go out, he went out, Jacob, from with the face of Isaac, Yitzchak. In this case, it is emphasizing to go out. So the infinitive absolute, to go out. He went out, and it's emphasizing this going out. And in this context, we would say that Jacob had scarcely gone out. He had barely gotten out of the room from being with his father Isaac, and that's when Esau came in. So there's the emphatic use. So mot, tamut, to die, you will die, or you shall surely die. That is probably the most common infinitive absolute usage. Then there's the imperatival. Notice we have shamor, which shamar means to keep or to guard. But here it's an infinitive absolute. but it's used in the sense of giving a command to keep the day of the Sabbath, to keep the day of the Sabbath, or just keep the day of the Sabbath. It's actually used as an imperative. Then there's the contemporaneous. This happens actually in a few places. For instance, well, let's talk about this one first. And he walked, walking and eating. So, and he walked, to walk and to eat. That would be the wooden way, to walk and to eat. But when you see that type of construction, it's actually using the contemporaneous usage of the infinitive absolute. And so it actually works a lot better to do walking and eating. And he walked, walking and eating. And so he was going, excuse me, this is from talking about Samson. Samson had killed the lion, and the next time they went back to Timnah, he went to check on where he had killed the lion, and he saw there was honey in it, and he scraped the honey out. And so he was walking and he was eating while he was walking, and that's how that's used. He was walking, to walk and to eat. That means he was walking and eating at the same time. In Joshua 6:9, he's got to go and to blow, and it's going and blowing the trumpets. In 2 Kings 2:11, to walk and to talk. So they were walking and talking at the same time, as talking as they walked. In 2 Samuel 3:16, to walk and to weep. So they were walking and weeping at the same time. Jeremiah 41:6, walking, to walk and to weep. And so it was walking while walking, walking and weeping at the same time. Jeremiah 50, chapter 50, verse 4, going and weeping, same kind of thing. So those are a few examples of the contemporaneous, where there's two things happening at the same time. So you get two infinitives in a row, two infinitive absolutes in a row. And they're obviously noticeable. You've got the comets and the holem vav. You've got the comets and the holem. I could have circled that whole thing, the holem vav and the holem. So that's that contemporaneous usage. And then there's the complementary, to stone, him, with stones, all the congregation. So to flip that around for better English, all the congregation shall stone him with stones. But it's to stone. We see the comets, we see the holem vav. So that's to stone. Those are the top uses of the infinitive absolute. Okay, so now we'll take a look at yesh and ein. There's yesh, there is; ein, there is not. This is called the particle of existence. Yesh, that's the particle of existence. Ein, the particle of non-existence. Those are the better terms for those. The way I remembered it is Bonnie your wife? Yesh, she is. Yesh, she exists as my wife. Yesh. What would I Ain? Well, Ain, I think of ain't. I think of ain't. Ain't. There is not. It doesn't exist. So those are the particles we're going to look at: particles of existence and particle of non-existence. There is, yesh, there is. Ain't not. There is not. And these are pretty common too. You'll run into these a lot. So we have yesh melech. So there is a king. Yesh melech, there is a king. Ein melech, there is not a king. In Ruth 1:12, we say yesh li tikva. I don't know if you recognize that word or not. That's the Israeli national anthem. Tikva means hope. So there is, yesh, there is, yesh, there is. So there is to me hope. There is not to me hope. There is to me hope, or I have hope would be the smoother way. And if you don't want to do the wooden rough translation, I have hope. There is to me hope. There is not to me hope, which I do not have hope. Okay, another example from Genesis 44:20, Yesh lanu, there is to us a father. This is the brothers of Joseph talking to Joseph, not knowing it was Joseph, but talking about the other brothers of Joseph there that were saying to Joseph, yes, there is to us a father. There is to us a father, or we have a father. And a man there is not in the land. And a man there is not, or on the earth, in the land. You can go either way. Which would be smoothed out as there's not a man on the earth or in the land. So that's yesh and ain. So let's go over the vocabulary on page 233. Okay. Zavak is to sacrifice, to slaughter something for a sacrifice. I don't think it has to be a sacrifice, but it does mean to slaughter, zavak. Now, here's one of the things I think we've talked about it before. One of the things Hebrew does to build nouns is to put a mem in front of it. So if you put a mem in front of it, it becomes mizbeach. The vowels change a little bit, but it's just a mem in front of the zayin, beit, het. And so mizbeach is an altar. That's the place of sacrifice. So anyway, zavak is sacrifice or slaughter. Chana is to camp. Of course, you hardly ever see it that way. Usually it's like vayachanu. Vayachanu would be, and they camped, something like that. But chana is camp. Nuach is to rest. Notice that the furtive patak there should be under the right leg of the het. And most times it's that way. But in the printing of this book, they don't have that lined up right. Nasa is to pull out. Literally to pull out, but it's used oftentimes whenever they to like break camp and to go on in their journey or to depart, to start out. When I'm translating literally or during the readers groups or something, I always say pull out because that's what it is. Nasa. And it's funny because we kind of use that in English anyway. If you've been in camp somewhere and you get ready to go somewhere else where you pull out, I mean, that's been used. Maybe that comes from Old Westerns. I don't know, but it makes sense to me. Pana is to turn. Patach is to open. I think we've seen this as a noun. Patach is an entrance. But if it's a verb, like we have here, patach, it's to open. Radaf is to pursue. They have follow after, and I really don't like follow after because the others, follow after sounds so lackadaisical compared to all the other words they have there for you. To pursue, to chase, to persecute. All of those are right. Follow after, I think that's pretty weak. I never use that. But we do have some translations that do that, like at the end of Psalm 23, surely goodness, tov, and mercy, which is actually chesed, loving kindness, unfailing love, will not, it doesn't say it will follow me all the days of life. It says that goodness and chesed will pursue me. And I think that's a significant difference all the days of my life. So radaf, and a lot of times it'll show up as like a participle or something. It'd be the ones pursuing or a verb they pursued, something like that. Saneh is to hate. Sha'ar is to what is left over. It's what remains. Now there's also a sha'ar instead of the aleph. If you have, okay, so aleph is basically a silent letter, right? And ayin is the other silent letter. If you have sha'ar with an ayin, that's a gate. But if you have aleph in there, it's referring to something that's remaining or that's left over. Okay, then we have moed as an appointed time or meeting. You have like the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, ohel moed. So it's the tent of meeting, but it's meeting requires, if you're going to meet somebody, there has to be an appointed time, and that's how those are connected there. And so you'll see moed also used not only for like the tent of meeting, but also appointed times of the feasts of the through the year. Then we have machane. Now, if you keep your finger on machane and you go back up to the second word under verbs, you see the chet, nun, hey. Well, we have chet, nun, hey down here under nouns, but notice it's got a mem in front of it. And so while the first one, the second word that we looked at, chana, means to camp, and that's as a verb, saying, well, he camped or they camped or something like that. This one, machane, that is the camp. That's where they camped. It's the place of camping. That we've talked about that. So malach. Malach can be either a messenger or an angel. One of the interesting places where that shows up is in Genesis when Jacob is fleeing from Laban, and he sees the camp of angels, and he calls the place Machanaim, which means two camps. Now you can hear that same thing, that camp in there, Machanaim. This camp's dual. It's the dual form. But it was angels of God camped there. And then right after that, just within a few verses, he's sending messengers to his brother Esau. And so you see the exact same word. In the one case, we're going to translate it angel. But in the other case, we're going to translate as messenger. The angels are often messengers. There was an angel who came and told Mary she's going to bear a son, call his name Jesus. So that's malach. Then we have mincha. Mincha is a lot of times in like Leviticus, that's going to refer to a grain offering. They don't even, well, they say offering, but it's really specifically a grain offering. However, it's also used like when Ehud in the book of Judges took a mincha to Eglon. It was a gift, like tribute. So you see it used both ways. You just go by context. And then Nachalah is an inheritance. Any questions? Okay, I do want to make one final note. Starting on page 235, we have this something you should know about, or something you should know in the cool of the day. Most of these articles that they have at the end of the chapter are pretty good. When I think there's something wrong with them, I will tell you. And this is one that I want to say, beware of eisegesis. Exegesis is what we want to do. Exegesis is leading out from the text. What does the text mean? What does it say? That is the proper way to do Bible study. Eisegesis is reading into, and that is never a right way to do Bible study. And yet it does to get done an awful lot. And that's what he's doing, even though he's working with original languages of the Bible, and he's even referring to Akkadian. And does he refer to a Ugartic? I don't think so. I think he just refers to Akkadian. So there might be languages related. He's really out on a limb here. If you choose not to read it, you're fine. That'll be fine. But I'm not holding it back from you. You can go ahead and read it, but I want you to know that he's out on a limb. He has really no evidence. He's got an idea of what he wants the text in Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. He has an idea of what he wants that text to mean, and he is trying to justify reading that into the text. And he's really, like I said, out on a limb. The evidence is just not there. I've looked at this. I've researched it. I've gone through all kinds of lexicons. I've done searches trying to find some of the things he talks about because he doesn't give us all the information. He puts forward a very poor argument here. First thing that caught my eye was one, two, three, four, five, fifth line down. Well, to start right above that, a case in point is Genesis 3:8, a verse that has been mistranslated, and misunderstood. Okay, well, if all the translations are wrong, that raises a red flag with me because we got a lot of different scholars who work on translations, and I can see a translation getting something wrong. In fact, it happens. I know I could list errors on different translations, but when you make this sweeping statement that this has long been mistranslated and misunderstood, okay, this guy is going out on a limb. So basically, he's trying to say that instead of ruach meaning a breeze or a wind, which is exactly what it means, he's trying to say that the whole thing means a storm. That Adam would walk with the Lord in the garden, and anyway, he has this. He's referring to this storm. And so on the second page, 236, he refers to a cognate word in Hebrew, yom, that does not mean day, but means a storm. He says there is a Hebrew cognate, rarely used in the Hebrew Bible, but attested nevertheless. I can't find that anywhere. I think I do have an electronic version of Holiday, and I haven't looked there, but I cannot find this anywhere. He's really out on a limb because he's trying to say that the word doesn't mean day, and that ruach doesn't necessarily mean wind. And so then he offers his own translation, and this is really a very presumptuous and paraphrased fabrication. The second full paragraph, third paragraph on the page. On this understanding, the translation of 3:8 changes significantly. It now reads that then the man and his wife heard the thunderous voice of Yahweh God as he was going back and forth in the garden in the wind of the storm, and they hid from Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. That is just a lot of fabrication. Like I say, I can't find anything like this in any translation ever. I went back to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. They didn't do this either. I mean, it's just this guy is trying. They say that if you discover something that is entirely new that nobody's ever seen before, you're probably wrong, and that's where this guy is. I can't find anything to support it. He's just trying to justify his preconceived idea into the text. And another thing, I'll stop with this one. I'll get off my soapbox here after this. In Genesis 2:5, it says that Yahweh God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. And so he's talking about a storm. And actually, there was no such thing as rainstorms or rain at this point that we can see. It says in Genesis 2:5, that God did not cause it to rain on the earth, but rather a mist came up from the ground and watered it. So I think it's just plain wrong. So I just want you to be warned on that. All right. Any questions on any of that? Okay, then. Homework, chapter 21 vocabulary. Go ahead and work on your workbook, exercise 21. We'll go over that next week. And then go ahead and read chapter 22. Chapter 22, we'll be looking at the participle, which is our last conjugation. Okay. Any questions? All right, then. Thank you.